If you enjoy this video and would like to hear more of my stories, please click like and subscribe to be notified of when I release a new story. In today's video, we are looking at the Spurs Yid Army hooligans, one of the most fearsome in London in their day, certainly one of the most stylish, well-dressed mobs. I remember coming toe-to-toe with them back then and thinking, wow, these lot look the part. But they wasn't just Burberry Macs. These boys were pretty handy with their fists too, and well organised, and in my opinion a top crew that get a lot of respect. Instead of stepping back in time, let's go to present day first and listen to top lad Dante Hawkins' words and listen to his take on things. Then we will go back to the golden era and see how it all started for the Yid Army and hear from some Spurs terrace legends. This is what Dante Hawkins had to say. He grew up in West London and had his first football clash with Portsmouth fans shortly after hitting puberty. First little turnout I got involved in was against Arsenal the year they won the league at the Lane. I was about 13 or 14. Arsenal got held in for hours, so there were untold Spurs on the street. About 50 barmy bods slipped onto a side road as Arsenal were getting led out the ground. At the end of the road was about 6 old Bill behind. That was about 150 Arsenal. It was a weird one that old Bill charged at the group I was with, and then Arsenal charged behind them. Never really seen that happen before. The Gooners even looked a bit baffled. I hate Chelsea the most, but West Ham makes way more effort than Arsenal at home when they play us. They are game, I will give them that. They always seem to have a memorial or link-up for their top older bods, Rip Denton that lands on the Derby game, so they have a good turnout. Chelsea is one of the teams that you could stamp over their heads 200 times, and they still won the fight. They have never been done in the history of football violence, so they say. My personal best London Derby one was against Arsenal, and was a cup game in 2007. We couldn't get in the ground, so a handful of us watched it in one of their pubs called the Nelson. Halfway through they hit the pub. They got ironed badly. One was hurt quite bad with a bar stool around the head a few times. There was a lot of claret on the floor. It was a proper little row, but one not really heard of much. Sometimes the smaller ones are better because it's more personal and harder for people to hide. 75% of football bods want to hide. That's a fact. Small numbered rows you can't hide, and that's when you find out who's who. But he said the best fight happened when a group of just 20 Tottenham fans took on a larger mob of bloodthirsty Wolves supporters. The 32-year-old told James English on his Anything Goes podcast. We split up into fives, so we didn't attract attention from cameras walking up the road, and they, Wolves fans, had got off the train. I don't know if unstuck is the right term because we were giving it to them for a lot of the row. At the end, numbers started to show on their side, and they edged it at the end for me. It was proper row, 10 minutes, no old Bill. I and their top youth bod Denny locked horns with each other, and from that we became lifelong friends afterwards. I would say they edged it, but we had a very young lot and 100% made a proper account of ourselves. They came up to us. I've put this bottle straight through this geezer's nut straight away. I thought I'm going to hurt one of these badly first and set the tone for the day. So I put this bottle through the geezer's face, right through hard. All the glass had shattered into my hand, cut my hand, but his face, he went "Ach," and went back into the melee, screaming. I was thinking, this is going well, but they have got 40 people and they are a good firm. Dante then goes on to talk about firms that he actually rates. These are the mobs he rates. West Ham, because they always show out proper for Spurs. Arsenal, because I've had a few different offs with them. Wolves, for the row in the town we had with them. It was the best bit of FV I've been involved in. Millwall you can't not rate. They've got the most bods down there. Only thing is they don't make as many little moves as we do, but they defo got one of the best mobs. Borough, cause they have brought the best firms to Tottenham, slightly before I got involved, but still one of the best in my time to come to Tottenham. Hawkins even featured in a BBC documentary about football hooliganism, and received a 3-year banning order from games at 17. Thinking he was scrapping with a Chelsea fan, Hawkins once mistakenly punched a pal from his own firm. asked about getting into it with one of his own while appearing on Anything Goes with James English, he said, "I have, yeah. To be fair, I done that to one of my pals, one of the young lot. I did feel bad about it after, but I didn't know who he was. It was a bit dark. I did feel sorry for him." Dante has since turned his life around, and he is a professional MMA fighter with the nickname The Bull, and he has 4 wins and 1 loss. Hawkins ditched the hooligan lifestyle following a spell in prison. Further reminiscing about his hooligan days, Hawkins admitted that he liked it when Spurs would get trounced. He added, "Tottenham used to lose all the time. It used to be a lot more volatile. And I'd like it because we'd lose like 4-0 to Manchester United, and there'd be 100 people in the street wanting it to go off. It would be more of a laugh, but when you won, people came out more jolly." Dante said how he had got into plenty of trouble at school for fighting. He had then got into gang fighting, which had led one of his friends being shot dead in a nightclub after he had stabbed another man in a mass brawl. At the same time, he began fighting with Tottenham hooligans and was banned from matches for 3 years when he was 17. "First incident was when I was about 14, although I wasn't properly in the mix," he said, over a clash with Portsmouth fans. "Tottenham used to just go off every big game. There would be hundreds of geezers out there, compared to now there are a lot of annoying people floating about, wallies. But back then there were proper men. Everyone looked like they were bang up for it." He explained he actually preferred it when Spurs lost matches, as the emotions would run high after matches. He laughed. "I was saying, we can do these. And I think I was trying to half convince myself, because I looked round and they all looked pretty young, and I thought we are going to get turned over here. Tottenham used to lose all the time. It used to be a lot more volatile," Dante said, but his brutal past life has never left him. In one of his fights several years ago, a huge brawl erupted in the crowd after his Spurs followers heard a comment about arch rivals West Ham. Dante now talks about the big difference between fighting with hooligans and fighting in MMA. This is what Hawkins said about the two. "When you get involved in a football fight, the anticipation is quite high. When you turn a corner, there could be another football firm there. Your heart starts racing. You go into that fight or flight mode. The feeling isn't quite as intense in MMA, but it's more prolonged. It's definitely allowed me to deal with those emotions a lot easier. It's a different type of buzz, but there's nothing like winning a fight in MMA. I mean, a lot of work goes into getting the win. In this fight camp, I've been putting in a lot of work, training 2-3 times a day, being sick when put against pressure. I've even collapsed from working so hard. When you've been working so hard for something, to get the win is so much more special. You know what I mean? Obviously, at the football, getting a good result against Arsenal or Chelsea is amazing as well. But times have changed for me now. I'm trying to embrace the MMA wins even more. Everyone knows that I'm genuine. I've been there and I've done it. I feel people can relate to my story a bit more. A lot of the older guys aren't as relevant to young people now. People can tell who's chatting shit, people who are blagging stories, and people who are telling the truth, like me. I'm trying to come away from the football things as much as possible. A documentary recently came out on me called From the Cobbles to the Cage. I want people to know the real me. There's a lot more to me than just the football. Football's been a massive part of my life, and I'll never forget it, but now it's time to progress from that. Coming from a street fighting background, in a lot of these gyms, a lot of these guys have dedicated themselves to mixed martial arts. Sometimes you can get a lot of these hardmen geezers coming in and making a mockery of MMA, rather than being genuine with it. In that aspect, I think there's a lot more that you have to prove to these guys. You have to prove that you're not just in it for an image thing, that you're gonna just take easy fights and build a name for yourself like that. In this Romek fight, he's a legit opponent. Getting a win against him will put those critics to bed, I think. I was speaking about this the other day. To be honest with you, if I was to go into the football right now, I'd probably end up killing someone. Not literally, but I'd definitely be a bit dangerous. I used to be quite handy, before I even started MMA. I wouldn't really want to put myself in that situation now. It might end up a bit bad. I'll tell you what though, when I first started MMA a few years ago, I thought I could have a proper row in there, but I soon got humbled by some of the younger lads in the gym. We did some sparring, and it was a bit of an eye-opener. This wasn't a fight in the pub. If I ever thought it was going to go off, I would always strike first, in a street fight that holds you well. However, in an MMA fight, you don't have an opportunity to do that. With the stand-up. Now let's hear from ex-Spurs hooligan Frank Portinari about his experiences fighting with the Yid Army in some very specific battles against arch-rivals Millwall and other top crews. A self-confessed football hooligan has told of the maddest day of crowd violence he ever lived through, where men threw spears at each other. North Londoner Frank Portinari became a Spurs supporter as a teenager, during a golden era where the club was going from success to success. But he soon fell in with a dangerous faction of the team's fan base, after being seen standing his ground during an ugly clash at Stoke. By the time Frank had reached his 20s, he had become a key member of a violent gang that followed the team across the country and into Europe. But it was a second division clash with London rivals Millwall that saw the most brutal scenes of Frank's time as a soccer thug. Not long after Millwall had been highlighted by the BBC's Panorama programme as the worst example of football violence, Spurs were drawn away against the South Londoners in a Boxing Day fixture. I'd been to a Christmas party the night before and I had left at 5 a.m, Frank told podcaster Dodge Woodall. At 8 o'clock in the morning my mate Bill came knocking at the door, and I'm still half drunk. I'd done a bottle and a half of Captain Morgan's rum. I said, "Bill, you got to be joking, mate." And he said, "Come on, we got to go, I've got the works." Bill had borrowed his works van and filled it with shovels and pickaxes in anticipation of a major battle with the feared Millwall hooligans. I said, "What's the plan, Bill?" And he said, "We're going to drive down the Old Kent Road. We're going to attack the Canterbury Arms." I said, "Where is everybody else?" But it was just us two. Perhaps it was for the best that Bill's madcap plan was thwarted after police spotted the pair driving across London Bridge and advised them to rethink their plans for the day. But there was still a good deal of violent mayhem at the match that the police were unable to prevent. "That was the maddest day I've ever had at football in this country," Frank said. "I saw a fella put a screwdriver through another fella's cheek. There was wooden fencing being used, people beating each other with it, throwing it at each other. People had even broken up metal railings and were throwing them at each other like spears. I've never seen so many blokes wearing suits at the game, because they'd all been out at Christmas parties the night before, just left a party, and thought of it, we'll go to Millwall." Frank later gave up on football hooliganism, but his violent streak saw him spending time as a hard right thug before eventually finding some measure of peace in his 60s. Reflecting back, Frank had this to say: "As a young working-class kid, football was my first love. I genuinely enjoyed both playing it and watching it. It was certainly the first identifiable culture I became part of. Eventually, alongside that, I actively embraced the adrenaline rush of football hooliganism. I would attribute it to my understanding and sense of camaraderie and loyalty. It was adventurous, dangerous, and character-building. And for long periods of my life, it became my identity. An identity that was difficult to shrug off. Despite my long-term commitment to it, I do now question my actions. If my previous input has prevented other football supporters from attending matches because of the violence, that doesn't sit particularly well with me. Frank is a very controversial character and has a very shady past with links to all kinds of crime and violence. Frank did not take what might be considered the typical route to prison, that is, petty juvenile offending, namely shop theft, driving cars without permission, playing truant, more serious theft, drugs, multiple court appearances, then a career in and out of custody. He went from being a football fan to football hooliganism to political extremism to providing guns for terrorists and then prison. He likens his criminal journey to being on a treadmill. He was carried by momentum. He gained status from being a football hooligan He was looked up to by people his own age and respected by elders. When he was eventually taken to court and punished, earning a criminal record at the same time, he saw it as a badge of honor. Moreover, he thought it would impress his partner, who he has been with for 50 years. He avoided going to prison while a hooligan, narrowly, but he was unperturbed. He says that had he been taken into custody, it would have enhanced his reputation, and that was more important to him. Some of his fellow hooligans became his comrades when he started to get into political extremism and then later into terrorist activities. There was no question of him being radicalized by others. You will hear Frank discuss how it was he who was leading the radicalization process. People followed him out of loyalty. Let's move on to actual Spurs clashes now. These are the details from when Spurs Yid Army came up against Chelsea. This is the headline from one London newspaper and various media outlets. Chairs and bottles thrown as Chelsea and Tottenham fans cause trouble outside a pub. And here is the details of the clash. Chairs and bottles thrown as Chelsea and Tottenham fans cause trouble outside pub following the Premier League clash Saturday afternoon. Various videos have been uploaded showing what looks more to be Morris dancing than anything. However, what we didn't see was trouble inside the Finborough Arms pub, which allegedly happened. It is said that Spurs fans were smashing up the pub before trying to take on the hooligans of Chelsea outside of it. The pub said, "Can I just say a massive thanks to all the Chelsea fans today who came to the pub. You never let your team down and stuck up for the pub, which makes me feel very proud to be here and serve you all on a match day. Thank you all for your support. It was home fans only today. Didn't realise they were Spurs till it was too late. They were hanging around outside. I rang the police before it started. It took 20 minutes for them to respond. We will be wiser next time they pick the pub, as it's a soft touch as no police presence. Everyone is fine, no body hurt," said Spurs official. "We should be doing more to keep these tears away from match days." After one Twitter user called them scum, they replied, "Are you that simple? We are not Chelsea. We are a public house that happens to be beside the ground. We are a theatre, a music venue, and your mate smashing the pub up is moronic. There was children, women, old ladies in there, not even in there for the football. Grow the F up." The Finborough Arms are hoping that these Spurs hooligans, or should we say Peaky Blinder wannabes, captured on their CCTV is caught and have action taken against them. Here are details from another Spurs clash. This time it's with their North London rivals Arsenal. Police in riot gear clashed with fans outside Tottenham Stadium after Arsenal's 3-2 win over their fierce rivals. Mikel Arteta's men remain top of the Premier League table after holding on for all 3 points. But there were ugly scenes at full time yesterday as riot police clashed with fans outside Tottenham Stadium. Some supporters could be seen being knocked to the floor, while another was dragged along the ground in front of stunned onlookers. Various projectiles were also hurled at the police, who wore riot gear and high-vis jackets. Reports from the ground suggested the clashes were between cops and Spurs fans, although that has not been confirmed. Then there was this clash against Dutch team Ajax. Police are searching for a group of football fans after bricks, bottles and concrete blocks were hurled in a violent clash before a match in North London. The brawl took place as Tottenham Hotspur and Ajax supporters made their way to a Champions League game on the evening of April 30th. Officers had separated the rival bands as they walked down Tottenham High Road, but the thugs confronted each other again a short while later. As a brawl broke out between the two groups at the junction of High Road and Brereton Road, men from both sides began launching dangerous missiles at each other, Met Police said in a statement. Detective Sergeant Matt Simpson said, "Officers faced unacceptable levels of violence before this football match, with groups of men arming themselves with bricks and bottles. I would urge anyone with information on the identity of these individuals to come forward and assist us with our inquiries. A number of individuals have already been identified. However, detectives are keen to identify 10 more men, all believed to be Tottenham Hotspur supporters, who were involved in the fight." We have made a number of identifications already, but we are now appealing for the assistance of the public in identifying the remainder, Mr. Simpson said. 4 men from the Netherlands who travelled to the game have already been sentenced for their part in the disorder, and a further 8 have been identified by Scotland Yard's Public Order Investigations team. Another violent clash was when Spurs played Southampton. Again, it was all over the news and social media. This is what the outlets said. Southampton and Tottenham fans filmed throwing chairs at each other. A 61-year-old man from Bursleden was left needing hospital treatment after suffering injuries to his face. 10 men have been arrested and later bailed following the brawl, which police believe involved fans making their way out of the city at around 6:05 p.m. Those arrested on suspicion of violent disorder and other offences are 4 men aged 22, 23, 25 and 27 from Waltham Cross, a 19-year-old man from Haringey, a 33-year-old man from London, a 24-year-old man from Hoddesdon, a 24-year-old man from Kings Lynn, a 19-year-old man from Southampton. There has been another high-profile clash between Spurs and Chelsea hooligans in recent times, which resulted in many casualties. Here's the details. The incident occurred outside a popular West London pub on a Sunday evening. Innocent members of the public were left in a state of shock, and it was extremely fortunate that none of them were injured. The court heard how the gruesome clash was carefully arranged. Earlier in the day, several police officers overheard one Tottenham fan talking on his mobile phone. It is believed he was talking to Chelsea supporters in an attempt to organise a fight. With him was Davidson and a group of other risk supporters, those with a history of violence, and the gang was trailed by police from a pub in Vauxhall Bridge Road to one in High Holborn. But at 8:15 p.m. police were called to a large disturbance at the White Horse after staff spotted a large group of Spurs fans who had been drinking in the beer garden, arming themselves with bottles. They were met by a gang of Chelsea fans who brought with them a stash of weapons, including knives, baseball bats, pool cues and an ice hockey stick. Police had maintained a strong presence at the match, including officers on horses, and even filmed supporters who they believed might cause trouble during 34 people, many of whom had been drinking heavily, were arrested near the White Horse pub in Parsons Green, where the clash took place on March 11th, 2007. About 100 thugs were involved in the melee after the FA Cup quarter-final match at Chelsea's Stamford Bridge ground, which ended in a 3-3 draw. 6 supporters were taken to hospital with stab wounds and head injuries, and police said it was surprising that no one had been killed today. Although the arrests have only resulted in these 2 convictions, Detective Sergeant Mitchell warned that football hooligans would not be tolerated. He added, "Groups such as this, no police are monitoring them. They should be warned, they will be prosecuted." Davidson and Bowden are due to be sentenced at Blackfriars Crown Court on August 15th. So as we have heard from all the incidents, and there are many more by the way that I haven't listed or mentioned in this video, maybe I will save it for part 2, but as you have heard, Spurs are a very active and dangerous crew. Here is a little bit about their history. There had been a number of incidents of hooliganism involving Spurs fans, particularly in the 1970s and 1980s. Significant events include the rioting by Spurs fans in Rotterdam at the 1974 UEFA Cup final against Feyenoord, and again during the 1983-84 UEFA Cup matches against Feyenoord in Rotterdam and Anderlecht in Brussels. Although fan violence has since abated, the occasional incidents of hooliganism continues to be reported. In my opinion, Spurs are a top mob and have been since the 70s. Like I said earlier, they have big numbers and were the best dressed crew I had seen at the time and set trends. Respect, boys. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you would like to see more, because I have many more stories to tell, then please like this video and click the subscribe logo in the bottom right of this screen. Thanks again and see you next time.